right, comeback team community. We're in Sarasota, Bradenton, Florida. We're at IMG Academy. This is the IMG Academy podcast series. We have an incredible guest today, Taryn Morgan. She's Vice President of Athletic and Personal Development here at IMG Academy. You know, we spent the day here yesterday. We got to meet with a bunch of the directors. You know, as a young high school athlete growing up in California, to see what the kids have here at the IMG Academy in terms of sports science, nutrition, physical personal development, mental development, athletic development, it's mind-boggling. I felt like I had won the golden ticket to be here yesterday. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, Taryn is first off, she's a class act. She's the best athlete that I've ever had a chance to work with. Talking about somebody that leads from the front. I had an opportunity to be here at IMG over 10 years ago. I came in 2009. And what I immediately began to realize was that an organization like this, it requires somebody that has a very, very high level of organizational structure and mindset to be able to bring things together. Now, we've always talked about that integrated opportunity that we use from different disciplines and different aspects and areas of performance. But Taryn is better than anybody that I've ever seen in being able to not only coordinate the operations efforts, the what you see, the product of what you see, but Taryn has been phenomenal at being able to manage teams, teams of coaches, teams of directors, teams of administrators. And through the years, I've learned so much from Taryn. To this day, I've never beat her in anything. We tried tennis, she smashed me. Basketball, she beats me in horse, and even in shooting paper baskets in the basket, but she's an amazing athlete, and her mindset of leadership and excellence is top notch. And I've been honored over the last 10 plus years to have the opportunity to associate with her. And, we're honored to have her today. So Taryn, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Well, the feeling's mutual, of course, and it's been great getting to know you guys over the last couple of days.
What we like talking about all the time is, how do you become your best self forward? All right. It doesn't have to be a significant injury that you come back from or a significant setback, but sometimes the setbacks are more subtle. All right. Sometimes the setbacks are maybe you had a year, you're a young athlete and you had great statistics for 1 year in your sophomore year, but maybe your junior year, you didn't have as much success. And maybe it wasn't because you were a worse athlete or because you were injured, but because, maybe you're on the scouting report now. And, the mentality changes now when everybody's focused on you, where last year you kind of snuck under the radar. I know your background is in mental conditioning, right? What are some of the strategies that you would say from the young athlete perspective here at IMG Academy that you use to help them overcome some of the things that say, hey, have I fallen off? Have I gotten worse? What are some of the strategies that you use to help deal with that?
Sure. I think, when we look at the athlete, I think for us it's really about putting them at the center. And so we have all the support pieces around them. And I think when you look at it from that holistic development and you look at it from a humanistic perspective, that they're a person first. We can't be prescriptive. We can't have a menu of we're going to do this, this, and this in this order, because everybody's a little bit different. So I think, first is asking the right questions and listening to what the athlete is telling you. And then it's looking at taking what they say and figuring out what's going to help them in the best way right now. So what I've seen over the years working with, I don't even know how many athletes now, at all levels, and that's the best. It could be the 10 or 12-year-old tennis player, it could be the NFL combine guy, it could be the Olympic figure skater, or the 15-year-old golfer. You start to see that if we can get them to use their thinking to help them instead of hurt them. That self-talk, that inner dialogue is such a huge thing. And when people say, what's that one thing that you always have to work on with people? It ends up being confidence. And for me, over the years, it's what helps confidence is preparation. And not just relying on the outcomes, but relying on the process and that preparation to build the confidence, teaching them how to think about the right thing at the right time and understand that, failure is a part of it. Mistakes are a part of it, and you're not going to be perfect. But if I can focus down on that small thing that helps me, not the big stuff, not the weight on the shoulder, I got to win or have this ranking or be great. No, I just got to move my feet. I just got to, focus on coming through the ball or the follow through or whatever it may be. And so I always say for me, helping athletes is how to get them to think simple.
So you are a Hall of Fame athlete at your school. Taryn went to Stetson, and she played multiple sports, and she is on the wall in the Hall of Fame at her school. How have you seen some of the programs and some of the operations, some of the processes here at IMG Academy? How much of yourself do you see in that integrated process and approach? Because you can't just you didn't focus on just one sport, right? And it's ironic that you focused on so many sports when you're at Stetson, and now you're here at IMG Academy focusing on so many sports. How has that transition been, and how much of yourself do you see in some of the kids that you work with?
I think it's interesting, and I'll take it even farther back, because I think it was growing up, my parents exposed me to everything. We were water skiing and surfing and playing tennis and doing all this stuff like when I was 4. And then we kept doing stuff, and we'd go play golf in the summers, and we'd do that. And I actually did 4 sports in high school.
Wow.
But had a tennis career going all along too. I made it to number 1 in the state and number 9 in the nation. And then we had this time, and I think when you talk about coming back and overcoming adversity, like my family didn't have a lot of money. And my dad was a car mechanic, and my mom was like a secretary.
Right.
And so, but they did their best at it, and you saw that hard work and the work ethic. And my dad was also the guy that said, well, I'm going to build us a house. Like we were living in the trailer, and he decided to build a house. And then he's like, I'm going to dig a pool, and just went out with a shovel and started digging it, right?
Wow.
So I think when I think about some of that stuff, and then that reality check for me when everything seemed to be going so well in a tennis career, like I was going pro at that point. You're 12, 14, you don't know any better. And then it was like we couldn't afford to go to tournaments.
Yeah.
And that was then kind of, I think, when I brought in, and I'm like, well, yeah, I'm gonna play volleyball and basketball. And then my basketball coached softball. He's like, you can do softball and tennis at the same time, of course.
Mm-hmm.
At that time point too, we didn't know how to get recruited or how to go to college. We just didn't know. It wasn't like now you have all the resources around. And looking at schools, I always thought, oh, Florida State, the big schools, I'm going to go play tennis. And we were too late. Like, we didn't realize it happened earlier than your senior year. And so it was kind of another reality check. And, thankfully, we had a friend that helped and a coach that helped. And then by that point, too, for me, it was, I want to play 2 sports. I want to do volleyball, too. I want to, tennis was going to get me there because I could get the scholarship and academics. I always remind people my scholarship was half tennis and half academics because I think that's so important. But I got to walk onto the volleyball team, and they were willing, Stetson was willing to let me do that, which I still am, I'm so grateful for it. But I think all throughout that time, it was being able to have support around you. And I think even then I thought I was going to do exercise science. Who knows? I might have been an athletic trainer or strength coach.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I was playing tennis, and then I stayed to coach a year. And the psych and the mental side just stood out. When I coached, I ended up coaching the mental.
Right.
Not the technical. And so that was that shift for me.
Yeah.
Where the mental became so important. And then was like, well, what do I do now? You know? So coached a year, ended up going to Florida. And really then there weren't a lot of jobs. You get your master's, no jobs. Okay, what next? Well, let's go get a PhD. Why not? And I think I'm so thankful I did that, because just the more education and the more experience to then be able to potentially set yourself up for a job. But even coming out, there was not many jobs still, but I was thankful and lucky to get to be at IMG Academy. But I think now when I look back how that helps, it was that learning to overcome any setbacks, that learning to utilize multiple aspects of performance, so that the mental side was just as important as the strength. But that if you can put it all together and look at it from that framework, then now I can help other people. And that's where for us, we have a lot of departments, but we realized they were working kind of independently. And so our big thing was no more silos. That's a dirty word now. Like you might as well say the worst cuss word if you say silo. But we're going to go interdisciplinary collaboration.
Love it.
So we set up pods, and everybody in the pod meets every week about the athletes and what are we going to do and how are we going to do it. And so that's where taking from that journey, I guess you could say, and saying, how do we put the best support around an athlete to help them in all different directions, but that support also has to work together and be on the same page.
Yeah, it's incredible to hear you talk. I mean, you're a sister from a different family in how you grew up and how you kind of gravitated towards sport. But the one commonality that just resonates with what you just said is the diversification of performance. Just wondering what your thoughts are looking back at how grateful you are that you diversified, not only from emotional and personal development, but physical development, physical recovery, your trials and tribulations with injuries and how cross-training sports helped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny because every once in a while I have that glimmer of, I should have done tennis pro, like,
Right.
But then I don't think I would have been the same person or it would have been such a different life. And I'm very grateful for how it ended up. But I think looking back and being able to experience different teams, working with a lot of different coaches, people, and then I think just it's general athleticism. Like we're really trying to look at athlete development models and utilizing the sports science side of it, and really how do we get athletes so that they can be the best athlete first, and then really look at that, what sport's going to be right or best for them to help them to get that college scholarship or whatever it may be. So I'm always thankful. Like I love the fact that I can still go out and play different sports or go play golf or go play tennis or softball is what we're doing right now, or kickball, or it doesn't matter. And
being a mental coach and an athlete and coming up through the trenches, so to speak. I mean, hard work. We've all been athletes. We still are all athletes. And you said something earlier, potential athletic development, the capacities that we all hold, and we work hard to get there. Mm-hmm. During the course of my career, I saw the mental aspect become more important. There's the difference between the outstanding athlete and the great athlete. Their skills are very much the same, but it was the mental aspect that really made a difference. When I think of that, I think of Michael Jordan as an example. Yeah. So I have two questions for you. How much do you see that the mental aspect makes a difference for that 0.5% to become outstanding, to become great? That's number one. The second aspect is you're in the mecca of sports science here at IMG. With all the technology that's coming out, what I'm seeing so much of is that a lot of athletes are starting to rely so much, and coaches, on the metrics. Mm-hmm. And, well, my spin rate or my launch angle wasn't quite there. When it comes down to the fact, for that to happen, you have to have the athleticism, you have to have the mechanics, you have to have the precision to make that happen.
And the preparation.
And the preparation.
Which gives you all
but
of
the
those
preparation
things.
Goes back to the preparation, the capacities, the mental aspect. Do you see, and again, it's a two-part question. Talk to me a little bit about the mental component, but then talk to me, are you seeing kids rely or athletes rely too much on the metrics and get hung up in the numbers when they've got the capacities within their own bodies?
Be the ball, Billy.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think it's funny when you're talking about the first part of the question, how does the mental side make that difference? It takes me back. So when I was at Florida and had to do a thesis, I wanted to know, how are some people better than others? Like, why are some people all Americans and some people are just college athletes? Or like, what are the top 1%? The Tom Brady's, the Michael Jordans, the ones
Tiger
who have
Woods.
it, And so I tried to figure it out. I did all these interviews, and I was like, is it genetics? Is it practice? Is it environment? Is it what? And at that point, after interviewing athletes, parents, coaches that were the most successful at Florida at the time, it actually ironically came back to what we're talking about today. It was, they all had grown up with a lot of challenges, but there was a significant adverse event in their life that had changed their perspective. I think one kid had lost a parent, one had a surgery where they almost lost their leg, one had grown up in a really tough situation, and over the years it gave them that mentality where it wasn't easy. And so they had that overcoming adversity, but then it was only if they had the right support. And I think that, to me, has still stuck out, because now when we work with our NFL Combine guys, and you sit down and talk to them, and you see the ones who have gotten to where they got because it's been tough, I always think they're going to make it.
They are, yeah.
Because the mental is different.
So true.
And when it's been too easy, people don't, when something hits you in the face and you've never had something hit you in the face till you're in the NFL, then you don't know how to respond. So I think kind of to answer a little bit of that first question of how much the mental it makes a difference, I think it's, you ask athletes, how much of the game is mental? And they all, 80, 90%. How much do you work on it? And it's like crickets.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think it is like that difference maker, that separating factor. But I think it comes with things like being able to having overcome adversity and perspective and that support and being able to learn from others and kind of that growth mindset idea. So I do like if you have people with the same athletic ability, the one that tends to rise is the one that's mentally tougher. And that can be trained. And then I think, to the second part, when we get into sports science, I mean, it opens up a whole new world for a lot of us.
Yeah,
I mean, I know when I was playing, there was no such thing. I mean, there wasn't half the stuff that there is now. And it's that perspective again. Can you put the right support around those athletes to interpret the data and help them understand what it means and how it can help or hurt them? And to figure out what metrics are really useful to them.
Yeah, that's the point. And what I see interdisciplinary, we talked about interdisciplinary approaches, our philosophy is that interdisciplinary approach.
Love it.
Find somebody who understands the technology that might be able to communicate it, but work with the performance coach, work with somebody who has a proficiency in biomechanics to say, this is what the optimal is. You're not doing that because of, and let's go back to the movement. So it becomes a medical issue. Then we find a physician that's open and has the willingness to say, okay, let's look at this from a medical side, and then it all flows together.
Why did we do the comeback team? She talks about the support system. I grew up with a really complicated family infrastructure, everybody, family separations and things. I kind of was my own internal coach, but I sought out father figures who I could emulate him in this case. So in a way, John Wooden, right down the street at UCLA, was an adopted father figure for me because of so much of the character build and stuff and motivational development of what's important in success. And, we did this to coach people on how to go from setback to comeback because, I think in our worlds, we see people all the time who maybe they were athletes once upon a time, but then they go into that deep, dark, post-athletic phase of life where they lose track of structure and process and discipline, and they have no idea who to turn to. And there is no support structure. Why? Because they're the pillar of their universe, whatever their little universe is. And, and so we kind of started this project to be that support structure, be that voice, that coach, to give them at least a structure. And then they can go find, specialty care when they identify it. But step one is, hey, realizing to our community members, wow, I've got a deficit in my mental approach to my comeback. And
one thing I was going to say is just that, Dr. Morgan, Dr. Masson, Chuck, all of you are masters of your craft, right? And it's not because of what you read in a book solely. It's because of the experiences, the wisdom, the things that you've gone through, not only with your personal lives, but we've all dealt with the experiences of others. So we're not, the athlete typically is dealing with their own experience, but we're dealing with, 1,200 student athletes' experiences, right? Here at IMG. To your point of the quantitative analysis stuff, Chuck, I think that Dr. Masson can look at an MRI and be like, I know this is what I see, right? Chuck, you can look at somebody throw a ball in real time, a pitcher throw a ball in real time, you can be like, I know exactly where we need to go. This is why I'm right. Taryn, I know you can do the same thing. The quantitative analysis anymore, if we're using it the right way, should reinforce what we already see to be right.
Agreed.
It should not be only giving us the answers that we don't have yet.
Absolutely.
So I can see that I know if he's throwing a four-seam fastball and it's coming down at a proper trajectory, then perhaps the spin rate is not high. The reason why it stays level now, we know, is because the spin rate is high. So we don't have to have the exact numbers to see what we see, but it takes wisdom and experience. So it's always going to come back to that experience.
Well, when, in surgical training, we do the same thing. And the bottom line is all of that stuff, the real intent is not the end result. It's accelerating the learning curve towards mastery. So whether you're a surgeon, an athlete, a coach, all of that data accelerates your opportunity to have the perspective 3-dimensionally, 4-dimensionally of what it is that you're studying, so that you can get to that point of, oh, I see that faster. That's the real tool. And the problem is society, industry, status quo maintenance, it establishes it at the standard, regardless of what the platform is.
And to your point
And
with that,
it's not the standard, it's a tool.
yeah,
And we got to remember, it's a tool.
but
Yeah.
we're relying too much on that tool. It's the new tool that
Deferring
we're
to
using.
the tool. Or you shut off your brain, defer to the tool.
Exactly.
And I've lost accountability and responsibility for being wrong.
Because I'm hearing way too often of the player, of the coach, talking about the technology and the results of the technology, when in fact you've got athletes that have done well before that technology, but now they're projected or predicted to be not so good, but they have that experience of being in the trenches, know what the job has to be, but the technology is now the new thing.
And we're starting to see people make real business decisions, like in the World Series last year, and Snow was going good, and because of the analytics, they took him out of there, and the other team, the Dodgers, were like, thank goodness they took this guy out, because we could not hit this guy. But because of the analytics and whatever they thought the numbers were supposed to tell them, they pull them, and then the result was they end up losing the game. Yeah. So,
and let's take now the organizations that play on those analytics and are projecting who should be making more, who isn't making more, who holds back,
because
which
of the
now
numbers.
plays in the mental aspect of that athlete.
And it doesn't measure the
and their
mental.
performance goes down.
Right.
It doesn't measure the mental, the heart, the grit, the fact that you've been in the grind, or you're going to win. You have a mentality to win no matter what,
Yeah, you're a winner.
whatever it might be. So I think that's the crazy part is if we rely too much on it without interpretation, or we let athletes rely too much on it, it can kind of mess that, like this ring or whatever I have, or the watch shouldn't tell me if I'm going to perform well today.
Right.
Exactly
It could guide, maybe, do I need to recover more, or do I need to do things? But I'm going to decide how I perform today based on my preparation and my confidence and my mentality and my focus. And so I think, going back to your other question, like, why are some people, what's that difference? Does somebody might be able to do the physical, the technical, the tactical. Can they do the X factor, right? Can they be that
Especially
winner?
when the championship is on
In
the
the
line.
moment,
Yeah, in the moment,
absolutely.
If they can't get into the moment and focus strictly on the moment and be in the zone, as they say, take all that technology and.
One more question I want to ask Dr. Morgan before we close up here. If there's one thing that you would say really drives you the most here, right? Because I know you've been here 15 years, right? Okay, I know it just kind of went like that. And I was here 10 years ago, and that seemed like that was the other day. You've seen a lot of different versions of this IMG Academy. You've seen it at 200 acres. You see it going on 1,000 acres. You've seen it at X amount of sports, and now there's multiple more sports. You've seen the departments, you've gone from a silo situation to an integrated situation. So you've seen so many iterations of this place. What is that one thing that drives you to continue to maintain a high level of excellence and drives you to continue to make progress here? And what are those things that you see that you can still make an impact on that drive you?
It's funny, I feel like we're still so far away, even with all we're doing. But I think what comes back to me, and I still remember a little story. I'll share two stories because I think it's that'll tie it together to your question. One is, I remember being at Florida and trying to figure out what in the world I was going to do with my life, because there were no jobs, and telling my professor and my advisor at the time, like, I want to work with athletes. I want to help people. I want to make a difference and teach this stuff that helped me.
Right.
Like, I don't know how I learned it. Now reflecting, like, it was my parents, it was the training, it was all the stuff, the adversity. But and I remember him saying, like, well, you probably should just go be a professor, because there's no jobs. You'll never be able to work with athletes. So that was a driver and a motivator to say, well, right, let me show you. And I remember that being one of the first. And then, I think the other one was my why. When we talked about your why is to make a difference to people's lives. however that happens. And it's exactly what you all are trying to do here, or are doing, not trying to do. And I just had my first tennis camper athlete that I ever worked with, a girl named Midori, that came over. She did mental sessions. She stayed in camp. We did more mental sessions. She ended up being a full year student the whole year. And that relationship that was able to build. And then 15 years later, literally right around my 15-year anniversary, she came back to IMG to do adult tennis.
Wow.
She'd actually stopped playing tennis for a while because actually the mental side was tough for her. She put a lot of pressure and all that. But she came back and we were going around and reminiscing, probably like you were the other day.
Yeah.
But she kept saying, like, my family was so happy that I had you, that you could be here as my support when they couldn't be. And the things you taught me back then helped me at my next school and helped me in college and now helped me as a teacher. She ended up being a teacher. And now even getting back into tennis, you know, she had called him and like, can you help me a little bit with the mental game? 15 years later. And it was kind of a full circle moment to say, like, why we do what we do is for that, to make an impact, to make a difference to people's lives, however it turns out. Like, she didn't become a pro tennis player. She didn't even play college tennis, but it impacted her life.
Right.
No.
And so I think that, to me, like, now when I look at it and what keeps me driven and motivated is we get to do that every single day.
Yeah.
And we have a amazing team that we can put around an athlete to do that in so many different ways every single day to help, I mean, again, to help kids, to help the next generation learn some of these things that are going to set them up for success.
Right.
And if you can make that small difference in someone's life, like, how could you not be excited about
Exactly.
that? So I think for me, that's the drive, that's the motivation, and that's what I try to bring to the team. Like, our athletic and personal development vision is make a difference to people's lives.
That's amazing.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
You know, the bottom line for the community that's watching this, you know, what's been the most resonant and the most obvious to me in the last 24 hours of being here and hearing Taryn and all of her colleagues and seeing what the structure and process is for all these kids is what we're really trying to inspire or encourage or prescribe to everybody who's taken the time to listen to us, because it's incredibly potent and powerful to me to see children learning what it took me a lifetime to figure out, and at a young age. And you know, I'm not a regret kind of person, but it's fascinating to see that there can be a structure built into early life. So, you know, use your own kids as your own motivation for lead by example and inspire to inspire, and channel, you know, maybe some of this. I encourage it because what we need is triggers. We need the why. You know, Dr. Morgan alluded to the why. The why is, you know, how we embody ourselves, how we live, how we perform, how we handle stress and adversity, how we react to it, how we treat people in the midst of adversity. All of that channels back to our kids. And most of our kids don't have this. Most of our kids don't get this amazing mecca of personal development. And, you know, and I think one of the things I'm most motivated to do through this program and this podcast is really give the architecture, process, and structure to people that I feel like I've learned my whole lifetime. And this experience here at IMG Academy, the mecca of personal development, has just solidified that. So, you know, if you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for your kids, do it for your community, do it for your culture. Anyway, thank you for joining our podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you with us here at IMG Academy. Thank you, Dr. Morgan.
Thank you.
you.
I really
Thank you
appreciate
so much.
it. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
And, you know, follow us on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, website, podcast. We've got all of our exercise videos coming out this month. And thank you for joining us. Have a great week.